from your experience, people that are looking to upsize, where does that start? Where does that conversation start, or where does that thought process start?
So first, we always got to see how much you qualify for based on your current income. Right? Whenever we get people coming in, there's a thought of, hey, I want to sell my house. Try to figure out what their plans are, whether they're increasing the size of their family, going from a townhome to a single. I always like to run the numbers and figure out if whether or not they can upsize by taking equity out of the current house. You might say, why not sell? Well, first thing first is to see if they can keep that property, because we're in a market where prices are much lower than they were 2 years ago. So financially speaking, we see if they can afford to have a second mortgage for the new property, keep the first one by refinancing, taking up to 80% of the available equity. Now, yes, now they got two mortgages for two different properties, but now they're looking at long term. How much will this property appreciate in the next 5 years, right? So you want to be able to upsize and still have an investment property that will give you return on investment when it comes to selling it in 5 years. Even you as realtors, sometimes you strategize with the clients saying, all right, if you sell it right now, you're going to sell much less than you would in 5 to 10 years from now, right?
100%. And I think it really depends on people's situations and people's goals, like you said, right? Like some people actually want to build wealth long-term through real estate. So holding on to that property might make a little bit more sense. But there's other people that, sometimes they wouldn't qualify by holding that property and then, buying something else. Sometimes people need the full equity out of that property. So for those people, talk a little bit about the strategy. Like when you sit down with them and they come up to you and they say, listen, Maz, like, I'm sick of sleeping in the basement because we don't have enough bedrooms. Kids are getting old.
Been there, man.
I can't stand it anymore. We need more space. So where does that conversation start with you?
Yeah. So what we always do is we look at what their income, as I said, we look at the income, see where the income states at, and see what their threshold is, right? Sometimes they wouldn't qualify for keeping their current property. So number one's always looking at all their income, looking at the assets they currently have, how much down payment they currently have in their savings or checkings or TFSA, and seeing if we can qualify them based on just taking out 80% of what's available to them in the current home. If not, we say, all right, let's run the numbers. We run the first option of keeping the property. Now let's run the number based on the projected sale of the current property. So we always do step 1 and 2 before we win step 1. So we see what kind of equity is available and say, okay, well, unfortunately, you don't qualify for keeping your current townhome and upsizing. So then at that time, come back to you guys and say, look, the client has to sell their property because there just isn't enough income to be able to qualify them for them being able to keep their current property and renting it out and then purchasing a second property, right? But what we always like to do is take a look at their whole portfolio and see what options they have before we determine whether or not they're going to upsize by keeping their current place and renting it out, or sell their current property and buying their dream home, from going from a townhome to a single or a mansion, depending on where you're buying a home, right?
For sure. And I mean, there's lots of different aspects.
It's a little better.
It's better,
Yeah,
eh?
it was like echoing
Without
in
the
my own voice.
So yeah, I mean, like there's different financial things you got to look at once you're upsizing. It's not just the price of the home, right? Like obviously your mortgage is more than likely going to go up, but you also have utilities that are going to be more expensive. You're going to have higher property taxes, and all that kind of stuff. So how do you really prepare people when they sit down with you for those, for those larger payments?
We look at, because right now, obviously, if you refinance, most likely your rate's going to be higher than what you currently have. So what we look at is, I love creating Excel sheets. I'm all about Excel sheets. I look at what your new monthly payments. What's that?
That's why you're
Dude,
really
man,
fun.
this is why I wear the glasses. It gives me that professional edge. But no, I love creating Excel sheets because it's one thing to talk about what numbers will look like, and it's another thing to have it written down. Okay.
Yeah.
Some people, even if they can qualify for refinancing and making a purchase by upsizing, it might still not make sense to them. So we always got to look, okay, now your payments after the rental income that will come in, your payments are still higher by, let's say, $500. Could you afford to pay an extra $6,000 a year to keep that property, with hopes of at least 3 to 5% of a conservative appreciation on that property that you kept.
Not just that too, but I mean, like, holding that property, now you got to, like, you got to maintain it, right? So depending on, I think it's really, you got to look at it from like a macro, you know, because, like, let's say the roof is up in 2 years, you got to change the roof. That's a massive payment, right? Windows, stuff like that. Do people really want to deal with being landlords, especially with all the horror stories you hear?
This is when you guys come in. Right?
It's not for everyone. It's not for everyone.
No, it's not. And that's why I always say it depends on the individual and what the threshold is, because not everyone has the same goals. I'm not gonna have a client who's in their 60s trying to sell them on the idea of becoming landlords. Right? And they're in a position in their lives where they want less stress. They've most likely done their investing in their lives where it's like, look, I just want my bungalow that gives me the luxuries of having that single home where I have a little bit of space between me and my neighbors. I don't need to be a landlord anymore. So it all depends on the client, but I always like to give that option and see what their mindset is and what they're looking for in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, well, that's great. And so let's segue to this. So, I mean, a lot of people probably already know their financial situation. A lot of people don't, but let's just assume people, like, have been crunching the numbers and they know it's something they want to do. And the reason we're here is because
tell them what we do.
The actual, like, process of making that transition is a lot easier said than done, right? There's a lot of balls that are up in the air when you're doing it. So let's talk a little bit about some strategies and how to kind of, obviously assuming that they're selling their house as well and they got to buy a new house. Let's talk about some strategies on how to do that as seamlessly as possible, because that can get very complicated very quick if you don't have the right strategy behind you.
I don't think it's just strategy, it's having the right team. Having the right realtor, having the right mortgage agent, having the right lawyer on your side, even your accountant. It's very important.
Baby.
What's that?
Mark and Maz.
Mark and Maz and Paul.
Maz and Mark and Paul.
And PM. But it's very important. You heard it here first. It's very important to have the right team. Like for me, whenever I work with someone, I say communication is so goddamn important. And having your best interests at heart, no pun intended. But for us, right, you got that, it took you a second. For me, and for whenever we work together, it's very important to crunch all the numbers and show you exactly the pros and cons of the route you want to take. For some people, they're making enough income and they're in a position in their lives where they're like, hey, I see the vision here of keeping my current property and being able to buy and upsize, even though I'm going to pay more per month and I'm not going to have any residual income coming from the current property that I'm going to rent out. I see that in the next 3 to 5 years, this property will be worth much more than it currently is, and then it's worth paying an extra $500 per month to rent it out and have a loss because I can afford that. And then there's other people that even though they can qualify to do that, it puts them in an uncomfortable position that they're not in the stage in their lives where they should or want to have to pay those extra payments just in hopes of getting appreciation on the current property. At that time, we say, all right, you sell this property, take all the equity available to put towards the subject property that's your upsizing home.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases too, sometimes, they want to purchase that property and then there's renovations that need to be made to the property as well. So they'll want that extra money by selling. So, okay, let's do this. Let's do like play by play. So somebody comes up to us right now and they're like, yo, we need to upsize. We want to sell this house and move into the other one. Let's talk about the market first, because right now, as you probably know, things are starting to get a little bit more competitive out there. I'm personally starting to see multiple offers come back for any listing that is priced well and shows well right now.
Are you seeing it for listings over 700?
Dude, I'm seeing it in everything right now. I'm working with clients that are looking 1 mil plus. And over the past couple of weeks, we've booked some showings, and we haven't even had a chance to get into the property before they get an offer.
And what do you think that is?
I think that the buyer confidence is back. I think buyer confidence and FOMO. So you always have these people that are trying to perfectly time the market, right? When interest rates are low and prices are high, they're not buying. When prices are low and interest rates are high, they're not buying. They're trying to perfectly time it. Nobody, by the way,
stocks. You just got to get in.
Nobody can just time the market.
Yeah, I agree.
But there's people that are like, okay, I know right now where the market's trending because obviously the rates have held
It's also
for
the news. The news makes a big difference.
yeah, big time.
There's no fear mongering as much as there was before.
Exactly.
Right? And you're seeing people come in and say, you know what? What's the strategy? And the strategy I always like to use right now is my slogan right now is buy now, close later. Right? You buy now,
100%.
you close it in 4 months from now. You get the rate, you get the price now. I get you the rate, I get you the approval, but then we can revisit it closer to your closing and see what the available rates are at that time. Because as soon as the rates start coming down, and you're starting to see that, there's more and more consumers coming into the market. There's less people that are scared of where the market is going. So we say, okay, buy now, and I'll just make sure I get you the lower rate, because as soon as rates go down, which you see them slowly trending, the price of homes are coming up. And you guys are seeing on your side, because when you go to see the listing, it's already sold.
It's wild, man. I mean, don't get me wrong. Properties that are overpriced or properties that don't show well are still sitting on the market.
And why do you think they overprice them?
I think why do people overprice properties?
Yeah.
Because they want to make the most amount of money, obviously.
But is that a good strategy?
It's not. It's not. A lot of times I talk to sellers and they're like, let's price it up here so that we leave some room for negotiation and then we can come down. But what they don't understand is the longer a property sits on the market, the more you're hurting yourself, because then people start wondering what's wrong with this property. Why is it not selling? Even though it was just overpriced.
Less negotiation as well.
Less
now people see it's been
exactly.
on the market for longer.
I always tell people this. I'm like, let's say you're out shopping for a home, right? Are you gonna give a stronger offer for a property that's been on the market for 60 days or for a property that's been on the market for a few days? The strongest offers you're gonna get in the first 2 weeks that you're on the market.
100%. And you see that sometimes. People go and they're looking for a realtor, and one realtor promises them
100%.
promises them the world, and next thing you know, the house has been sitting on the market for 4 months, and then they end up saying, you know what, I want to go explore my other options, and maybe they had got a realistic price they could have listed with another agent, but now they wasted 4 months because someone promised them the price that was not realistic to today's market. Where on the other side, correct me if I'm wrong, you see agents where they say, all right, let's put the price a little lower so you can get that category of buyers, and then you get a flood of people coming seeing the house, which makes it more attractable, and it's been in the market for a less amount of time.
Absolutely.
Right?
And
I should be a realtor.
You should.
Huh.
You should. That was well said.
I learned from you guys, man. What can I say?
But yeah, man. So like we're seeing it a lot more often. But don't get it twisted. Like you can't just like how it was during COVID. You just throw your house on the market and you're gonna get like multiple
We're not
offers.
gonna get back to that.
We're not, and I still think that even though the market is trending back upwards, you still can't just list your home as is. Like you got to put some work into it. It's a product at the end of the day. You got to prep it, right? Like you got to still paint the house. You still got to stage it. You still got to do what you got to do to make it show make it as appealing as possible when it's on the market. Those are the properties that are seeing a lot of success right now.
Yeah. I remember you made a comment before, one of your videos you posted. What was the top things that you recommend people to do when they go get their house ready to be listed?
So yeah, a lot of people don't want to spend a shitload of money before they list their house, and that's completely understandable depending on their financial situation. But there are some things that you can do that aren't necessarily going to break the bank, but they're going to make a huge difference. And those are the kind of things that we try to focus on with our clients. So first thing is obviously paint the house. If there's only one thing you're going to do, it's paint the house. That's just going to give it a completely fresh new feel. The other thing is going to do, a lot of people don't realize it because they're living in the house all the time, but sometimes your house has an odor that you don't smell. You know what I mean?
Oh, yes.
Giving it a fresh paint job is going to get rid of that smell for the most part. Yeah. Another thing you can do is something as simple as changing all the light covers, the light switch covers, and the wall plug covers. You know, sometimes an older home, they start getting a little yellow. Doing that makes a huge difference. Changing the baseboards as well, updating them, or at least just painting them, and then the light fixtures. So those are the type of updates I always recommend people do if the house is a little bit older. Anything aside from that, especially in a market like we're in right now, you run the the scare of not getting your money back that you're investing into the property. Do you have any recommendations in terms of updates or anything like that?
No, I mean, I think you're bang on with that. I mean, I've only sold one of my properties, and I remember I put about 10 to 15 grand into the property. Painting was one of them. And I find when you do those little things, yes, you're investing into your house, but when it comes to people looking at your property, you're going to get that money back.
You're
You're going to
getting
get
it
more
back.
appeal, more interest, because people do like to come into a house and smell fresh paint. It subconsciously makes them feel like they're buying a new home.
Not just you're getting your money back, you're selling a lot faster than you would.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have the leverage in negotiations.
And you still recommend to do that even in this market.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I totally
Like, think about it, man. Like, okay, let's say you're going to sell your car.
yeah.
Are you not going to go get, like, a detail on it? You know what I mean? You're just going
100%.
to post it up for sale.
That's a good example. That's a very
Right?
good
Like,
example.
anything you're going to sell. Like, right now, I'm moving out of one of my offices.
Got
So
it.
I'm selling off some of my furniture. You best believe I cleaned it, made sure everything looks as good as possible, and then posted it for sale.
So why do you think people do that? Why do you think some people have a perspective of just trying to sell their home as is?
Because I generally feel like in a lot of cases, sometimes where rates are at and stuff like that, people sometimes don't have the money to do it. So
Yeah.
I'm working on something right now with a business partner where we can potentially get that work done, and then they wouldn't have to pay anything until after the sale.
Yeah.
Because it's not that people don't see the value in it, in my opinion.
So you guys would pay for it to be done, but then they reimburse you when the sale. But
Yeah.
what happens if they?
There'd obviously be some sort of
Got
an
it.
agreement in place, right?
Oh, that's nice, guys. You hear that? Not everybody does that.
Yeah, we're trying to
Okay.
work with people. You got to get creative in this
Yeah.
business, man.
Yeah, I agree.
Everybody
I agree.
does things the same way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So what can you do different? Like, why is everybody says, oh, we're going to market your property, we're going to do this. Like, obviously there is some differences in the marketing, but for the most part, everybody's doing professional photography. Everybody's doing professional
Yeah.
videos. What are you doing for your client to set yourself apart?
Yeah, I agree.
That's what I ask all the time.
It's adding value. Adding value is so damn important in our industries, both being self-employed. I think if you're like, you see some of these people advertising 1% commission, there's realtors that are just tour guides, and there's mortgage agents that are just rate providers. You want to be at that point where you're adding value and attracting clientele that wants someone that adds value to them, right? If you get someone that sells your house for less, do you not foresee them putting less of an effort since they've projected their own value to be much less? Again, that's my own perspective.
100%.
I understand everyone has a different direction of going with it. For me, it's like, I look at it like, if I give you a book, I love using this term. If I give you a bookmark and I say, read this book, it's going to change your life. Yeah, sure, maybe one day I'll read it. I give you that book for free. But if I charge you for that same book and say, Mark, this is $100 I want for this book, but I promise you if you read this book, after the $100 I've given you, it's going to change your life. You might put that book away, but you're always going to look at it and say, I paid $100 for that book. You'll one day pick that book up and read it because there's there's value that's added to that book, and you paid for it. So you're going to take it
100%.
more seriously because of the fact that you paid for it.
And the other thing is too, it's like if a realtor is gonna, bring down their commission that much, and that's like literally the money they take home to feed their family, how likely are they to fight tooth and nail for your equity, for the price point you're looking for?
Yeah, no,
Right.
100%, because they just want to get the deal done, right? Well, it's where we are. There is that in the industry, and even for us, there's people who guarantee clients very, very competitive rates by buying down their commission. But at the end of the day, how much service do they give you? How much do they explain the product you're getting? Do you know what product do you know what rate you're getting? Sorry, let me explain this again. You'll have some lenders you have some mortgage agents or brokers that'll buy down the commission to give you a better rate. But how much customer service are they giving you, and how much are you familiar with the product they're giving you? Sometimes there's no prepayment privileges. The prepayment penalty is much higher. So you always have to. For me, it's either educate yourself as much as you can. And once you do that, you'll realize, okay, I want to make sure I work with a mortgage agent or a realtor that adds value for me, right? So what's the saying my father always said, you cannot afford to be cheap, right? It's like going buying a car for $5,000 that needs $10,000 of work,
Get what
or
you pay
buying a
for.
$10,000 car that is ready to drive.